The first thing Rachel Carter felt was disbelief. Not the sharp kind that came with market crashes or betrayal in boardrooms, but a quieter, more humiliating disbelief that settled deep in her chest. Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, New Year's Eve, crystal chandeliers, a waiting list longer than most private jet manifests, and the words she heard at the host stand were the one thing she had never prepared for in her entire life. No tables available. Rachel Carter could buy companies before breakfast. She could buy the building she was standing in, the street outside, the view beyond it. She could buy silence in rooms full of powerful men and make them lean forward when she spoke. But she could not buy a seat at Lemon O'Shante tonight. She stood there, coat folded neatly over her arm, listening to the hum of celebration behind her. Champagne glasses clinked, laughter burst and softened, and rose again. Children's voices rang out, counting imaginary countdowns long before midnight. This wasn't the noise of ambition or competition. This was the sound of belonging. And she wasn't part of it. Tonight was supposed to be different. That was why this stung so badly. Rachel had left her assistant at home. No driver, no security, no entourage. She hadn't made a reservation weeks in advance because she didn't want to think that far ahead. For once, she wanted to walk into something unplanned and be welcomed anyway. She wanted to sit alone by choice, not obligation, and feel like a woman instead of a title. The host smiled politely, the way people smiled when they assumed she'd be fine. He suggested the bar, but his eyes told the truth. Nothing would open up. The night was full. The restaurant glowed around her like a locked jewelry box. She nodded, thanked him, and turned toward the door before she could do the thing she always did. Before she could offer money and turn discomfort into leverage. As she walked, every step felt heavier than the last. She passed tables filled with families leaning close, couples brushing knees, grandparents wiping crumbs from small hands. A father poured sparkling cider for his son, beaming like this was the greatest achievement of his life. A woman rested her head on her partner's shoulder, content in a way no accolade could buy. Rachel had built an empire, but she couldn't build this. Cold air slipped in as she reached the door. Outside, the city glittered, loud and expectant, preparing to welcome a new year. Fireworks would soon paint the sky. She knew how this night would end if she left now. Scotch in her apartment, lights off, watching celebration from a distance, telling herself it was fine. She had chosen this life. She had traded closeness for control, and control had never let her down. Then she heard a child's voice. It wasn't loud, but it was clear, curious, unfiltered, the kind of voice that didn't know yet how to ignore other people's sadness. Rachel turned without thinking. A little girl stood on a chair near the center of the restaurant, dark curls held back with a glittery clip. She was staring straight at Rachel, like she was trying to understand something that didn't make sense. The girl tugged on the sleeve of the man beside her. He leaned down, listening, then followed her gaze across the room. He saw Rachel, really saw her. She expected confusion, or the quick look away people gave when they didn't know how to categorize someone. Instead, his expression softened. He glanced at the empty chair across from him, hesitated, then, almost shyly, he raised his hand and waved. It was the smallest gesture, awkward, unpolished. A hand lifted and dropped again like it wasn't sure it had permission to be there. But it cracked something wide open inside her. The girl waved too, both arms this time, grinning like Rachel was someone she had been hoping would show up. Rachel froze. People didn't invite her. People requested her, negotiated with her, positioned themselves around her. This was different. This was an invitation with no expectation attached, offered by someone who didn't know her name or her net worth. Her first instinct was to leave, to protect herself, to walk away with dignity and pretend she didn't need this. Accepting meant admitting she was lonely. It meant sitting somewhere she didn't control. Her hand slipped off the door handle. Her feet turned back toward the room. She walked past the host, past curious glances, through the low buzz of conversation that bent and reshaped itself around her. The man stood when she reached the table. Not formally, not performatively, just naturally. He gestured to the chair and said they had an extra seat if she wanted it. Rachel sat. The girl introduced herself immediately, words tumbling out, like she'd been waiting all night to use them. Sophia, 7 3/4. She liked unicorns and science and macaroni and cheese, in that order. Rachel answered softly, almost unsure of her own voice. She realized she didn't know how to exist in a moment that wasn't transactional. The man's name was Carlos Brooks. He didn't explain why he had waved her over. He didn't apologize or make a joke. He simply welcomed her and asked if she'd eaten. When she said no, he flagged down a waiter like this was the most normal thing in the world. Rachel sat stiffly at first, coat still on the chair, hands folded like she might need to leave at any moment. But Sophia refused to let the moment stay stiff. She asked questions with fearless honesty. Was Rachel alone? Did she like the restaurant? Did she have kids? The answers came out quietly. No kids. Yes, alone. Carlos listened, steady and calm, letting silence breathe instead of rushing to fill it. Rachel didn't know why that mattered, but it did. As food arrived and conversation unfolded, something inside Rachel began to loosen. Sophia talked about school, about wanting a dog, about inventing healthy cakes that tasted like dessert. Carlos watched his daughter with a tenderness that made Rachel look away for a moment, unsure why her eyes burned. When Sophia went to the restroom, the table fell quiet. Carlos spoke then, sharing pieces of his life without drama. A wife lost to illness, a move to New York to start over, learning how to braid hair and pack lunches while carrying grief that never really left, only changed shape. He didn't ask for sympathy. He didn't need it. Rachel listened, truly listened. And when it was her turn, she didn't hide behind accomplishments. She admitted what she rarely said out loud, that she had built something extraordinary and forgotten to build anything else, that she had chased success so fiercely that she didn't notice when the people quietly drifted away. Carlos understood. He said loneliness could exist even in a full room, even in a life that looked perfect from the outside. The words hit her harder than any criticism she'd ever faced. Sophia came back, full of energy, and the night moved forward again. Dessert arrived. Laughter grew louder. The countdown crept closer. Rachel excused herself to the restroom and stared at her reflection, suddenly aware that something irreversible had shifted. When she returned, Carlos was helping Sophia into her coat. Midnight was approaching. They stood together near the window as the city began to erupt with color and sound. Fireworks bloomed over Manhattan, painting the sky in gold and violet. Sophia reached for Rachel's hand without asking. Rachel let her. As the crowd counted down, voices rising together, Rachel felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not victory, not control, connection. Real and fragile and terrifying. When the clock struck midnight, the room erupted. Cheers, hugs, kisses. Sophia hugged her dad tightly, then wrapped her arms around Rachel's waist like it was the most natural thing in the world. Rachel laughed, a real laugh, surprised by how easily it came. Later, outside in the cold, they said goodbye. Carlos thanked her for joining them. Sophia insisted they exchange numbers so they could have cake again someday. Rachel smiled and agreed. Walking home alone, Rachel realized something profound. That one small gesture, one hesitant wave, had changed everything. It reminded her that life wasn't meant to be won. It was meant to be shared. That success meant nothing if you had no one to sit beside you when the world celebrated. That night didn't fix her life, but it redirected it. And maybe that's all it takes. One moment, one invitation, one choice to sit down instead of walking away. If this story touched you, let it be a reminder. No matter how powerful, successful, or independent you become, your heart still needs connection. And sometimes the smallest gestures carry the greatest transformations. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and remember this as you step into a new year. You don't have to face it alone.